This is the last episode of our analytics series, talking about the power of demographics and device insights. Where and how are they listening? Welcome to Geelong Podcasters, your weekly podcast for tips and tricks to grow your audience. We are a group of passionate podcasters located in Geelong and the Bellarine in Victoria, Australia. If you're down our way at the end of the month, why not come to one of our free monthly meetup events? And also, find the booking links and more in the show notes. So we've touched on the basics of analytics and engagement and retention. Now we're talking demographics and device insights. So essentially, who your listeners are, where they're from, and why they're listening to you. This info is key in customizing your content and also gives you a bit of an idea of maybe the theory of who your audience is. You're able to see the data, the actual metrics and the information in front of you reflecting either your ideas back at you, so know that you're in the right place, or maybe your audience is not exactly who you thought they were, and that is interesting to know, so you can then cater your podcast accordingly. So let's touch on with demographic insights. So we're going to touch on location. So this is where you can get a sense of where your listeners and watchers probably are tuning in from. If they, if you've got a crowd down in Tassie, you can drop a local joke relating to there. Or say, for example, a lot of my clients have a lot of listeners in the United States, even though they are based in Australia. A lot of the jokes that they've been able to drop in, or references, or other specific demographic telltale signs have been widely utilized and actually encouraged by their audience because of their major demographic in the US. Other demographics that you can look into your analytics are age and gender. Some platforms even tell you the age range of the people who are listening to your podcast. Very handy for targeting options that resonate with specific groups. But of course, with the rise of GDPR and other data censorship, for a good reason, for privacy reasons, of course, sometimes you might not be able to get all of this data, but sometimes you still might be able to get a bit of a clearer idea of who these type of people are who listen and engage with your content. The other area that I want to touch on is device details. So these are the devices that are actually downloading or streaming your podcast. So this can give you a sense of device type. So are people using their mobile phones, tablets, or desktops? This can help you plan your content, and especially if your listeners are always on the go, you can then cater the way that you speak and the way that you communicate to make sure that you're not providing too many visual references. Or, for example, being able to say, hey, if you're interested in what we're talking about today, go click on the show notes, check out the main image at the top of the show notes, and then listen to the rest of the podcast so you know exactly what we're talking about, for example. The other thing that I want to touch on is platform preferences. So as a whole, with your audience as a whole, where are they watching or listening to you? Is it on Spotify? Is it on Apple? Is it on Stitcher? Is it on, iHeartRadio? Is it on another platform? Tailor your intros and your calls to actions accordingly, because say, for example, recently within the past couple of months of recording, we have moved from a subscription way of saying subscribe to your podcast to follow your podcast, because subscribe has become a paid method of platform, of way of engaging with these platforms and hosts of the platforms, so that people can generate income. Subscribe has become a paid way in the podcasting land, I should say, compared to following, where you're listening and engaging with the podcast, but you're not giving monetary value to engage in private content or maybe members only content. A thing I want to touch on is using this data to cater directly to your audience is helpful to know, especially when you have a specific platform that is more popular than others and it is growing and you're able to focus your efforts on promoting yourself there. You can then grow bigger and stronger and faster because you're able to have these ideas and demographics in hand. Over this mini series of 3 episodes, we've touched on the basics of podcast analytics, engagement and retention, and now the demographics and device insights. There is always so much more to learn when it comes to analytics, metrics, data, all the same thing again. But hopefully this series has given you a bit of an insight as to actually how it works, or what really things to focus on. Now, I highly recommend looking into some tutorials or maybe some just basics of what does this number mean. And like I said in my first episode of this series, write this stuff down, put it in a spreadsheet, make sure that you can look back on it and see your growth and feel good about your growth because you've got the numbers to show for it. This podcast is sponsored by me, Zoe, the Video Confidence Coach, connecting the dots of your personal brand with the power of video. See more in the show notes. Speaking of show notes, see all the show notes, including links, upcoming events, and details for this episode and many more in the episode description, or just go to vcc.training/Geelong-podcasters. Make sure you tune in for next week.